Today's video is going to be on a few things I've learned recently about slip application to the drippy slippy pieces. So I've been doing them for a few years, but always doing them the same way, and the designs I've done recently, firstly the magma, then the rainbow, and now northern lights, have really made me think about how I apply it. So I've kind of gone back to the drawing board a bit and started thinking more about that, and I wanted to do a quick video, well, not that quick actually, but a video showing what I've learned. So to start with, you'll need slip. I've got a video showing how I make it, but it's just dried trimmings. So I collect my clay when it's all the scraps in a bucket, add water to them, and then I've got slip. I don't add anything fancy to it, but I do colour it. So I've got black and white slip to show you the marbling effect. I just use these cheap syringes. It doesn't really matter, you can get a lot of them on Amazon, and it doesn't matter the specifics, but there are two kinds that I've seen: these screw heads that take attachments, and then the ones that are offset and just have a push fit for attachments. So when I say attachments, I mean things like these narrower heads will fit on. With some of them they screw in, with some of them, in fact, does that one actually screw in? Yeah, so they seem to be fairly standard. If you're going to use them, the screw attachments are nice, but in theory you shouldn't be applying so much pressure that the friction fit ones don't work. And the reason I prefer these ones is because the offset head makes it easier to get rid of air bubbles, and there's less cleaning, because these ones have an outer bit with a screw thread and an inner bit, so to get the slip out, that's a pain. So I'd recommend these ones. They're cheap, they wear out, you'll probably have to replace them fairly often if you do something like this, because the slip seems to kind of scratch the surface. So what I do is I throw my pieces the day before, I leave them on the bats so they can be returned to the wheel. This is a Hartley and Noble Russian doll bat system. The advantage of doing it this way is that they're still centered, firmly attached, and what I can do, I'll show you the process quickly. I think I have a full video on this, but if I don't, I'll redo it, and it's definitely a blog post. But you can trim while they're attached, so you can take off the wall. The advantage to this is you can feel how thick the wall is as you go, because you've got access to both sides. So I essentially do the majority of my trimming before adding the slip, which is necessary because you then can't trim the walls once you've added it. So that would be basically my process, and I get a fairly sharp, rounded rim to my pieces, so I think it's a nicer drinking experience. So I just trim those and then burnish them with a bit of plastic. This is the bag that the clay comes in. So that's how I would prepare my pieces, and then I have a few of them, and I'm going to demonstrate a few different ways you can apply the slip. So to start with, kind of the most basic way of doing it would be to have, and all of these are going to just have black and white slip. Obviously you can do a whole range of colours. I generally colour those with mason stains because the oxides don't tend to give that nice a colour. So one colour in each. You want to avoid air bubbles at all costs, which is where the nozzle on these is at the top, makes it a bit easier to get rid of it. So what you're going to have to do is, once you've filled them up, just tap them on something for a while to get all the air to come up, because the slip's quite thick, it's not going to bubble up readily, but it will after a little while, and then just take the top off, and that should get rid of the air bubbles. It's very hard to avoid them altogether, but worth taking just a little bit of extra time to try and avoid it. So, first application, I'm just going to alternate bands of them, which would work exactly as you expect. What I will also do is I will show you straight bands versus variation in thickness, because what I would normally do is vary the thickness. So, you add a band of slip like that. Again, you can hear it in the video, but there were a few air bubbles in there, which isn't ideal. You can sort of deal with them, but best to avoid if possible. So I'm going to mark out where all the bands are going to go. I'll do 6 alternating. So those are fairly even in thickness. Obviously there's a bit of variation from where you start and end, but you can exaggerate it. So we'll leave the top band as it is. This one I'll do a bit. So just by pulsing the application you can see there's a variation in thickness, and then this one I'll do more, and then repeat with the black. So band with a bit of variation. With a lot of variation. So then, this is where having it attached really helps, because if you're trying to do this and it's not attached to something, it'll bounce up each time. So, again, well worth leaving them on the back if possible. So, that is take 1, and you can see how the top bands tend to slide down because there's a slight variation in thickness, there's slight grouping, but they slide down fairly uniformly. So if you'd have done that the whole way down, you'd have even bands. These ones have bigger pulses, so they're coming out as just single big waves. That's how I tended to do it for the normal drippy slippy ones, which are blues, and the white clays off-white, so it sort of looks like the ocean and waves crashing on the shore. And then these ones have more frequent waves, so you can see they're wobbling, but you get more variation. But as a result, the frequency is greater, but the variation is a bit reduced because you're adding more slip. But that is kind of the most basic way of doing it. Then, and you can see there, if you get an air bubble, sometimes, in fact, if you get an air bubble like that, you catch it in time, you can just patch it up. You have to take the tip off it, but that's better than a hole, because the reason the air bubbles are so bad is because the glaze will generally not fill them, or will highlight them if it does. So they're always obvious, where if you can fill them and smooth them out, which you can do more easily when it's one colour, you can actually repair them effectively. Yeah, best to avoid them wherever possible. So, take 1, you've got 2 syringes, 1 colour in each.